Well, good evening and welcome to the fifth installment of Management 5321 Leadership and Team Building. Um, so great to be able to begin talking with a few of you folks and stuff. So this evening we started doing the just sort of talking with your classmates and stuff at 8 p.m. So I'm going to try to continue to do that every Monday evening. Was able to talk with Kathy and Turtle this week and Charles the week before. So again, it's not mandatory, but it's one of the things that if you guys have some questions or want clarifications or just to be able to chime in and have some conversation about some of the just overall the burning things about leadership and stuff, please feel free to come on in. Had a great discussion this evening, just from looking at the overall thing of leadership and where there were, I know Kathy and Turtle were going like, some of these theories just seem like they're wacko. Well, that's because they are wacko in some instances. So anyway, this evening we're going to be going over four chapters. So it's going to be rather aggressive, but disclaimer, I just wanted to let you guys know that this was not my idea. I would have done this very differently because I think trying to go through four leadership theories in one sitting can be a little bit overwhelming. So, but anyway, I got the course documents only a few days before the course started and didn't have the chance or the time to really go through and do that. So, with that being said, let's just go ahead, hop in. I'll get the slides up so you guys can see these. I'm also going to share the slides independently so you can go through those on your own pace as well too, besides the video that is here. So, okay, so the four chapters we're going to be talking about this evening are transformational leadership, authentic leadership, servant leadership, and adaptive leadership. There's going to be two things that each of these theories are going to increasingly emphasize. Number one, followership in involvement. What are follower roles? And so we're now getting away from the previous leadership theories where they have been very leader centric and these four are very follower centric. How do we develop? How do we enable? How do we delegate? How do we be able to go ahead and develop leaders out of followers is really what we're looking at here. The second thing that we're going to be looking at is the ethics, the moral aspect, the values of things. We've touched about that a little bit on a couple of the more recent leadership theories, but this is becoming front and center. And a large part of the reason why this is, and was we were talking this evening earlier with Kathy and Turtle about this, was if you have the chance to go into all the leadership theories, the Excel spreadsheet that I gave you guys on day one, take a look at that. Look at the history of all the leadership theories of when people authored things. And one of the funny things that happened out of World War II was this. A lot of the leadership theories started in the early 1900s. The, the fundamental definition of leadership had evolved to the point where it is influencing followers towards a common goal. Okay, so let's talk about Adolf Hitler. Did he do those things? Yes, he did. So if we are to look at the leadership definition at the time that only includes influencing people towards a common goal, Hitler was an amazing leader. But as people were starting to say those words for a couple of decades, they became very uncomfortable with this. And so that's the reason for these other leadership theories. You're going to see that some of these theories, the transformational, authentic servant, and adaptive leadership, started beginning to pop through the leadership culture to address this consonant, this comfort that people had with Hitler being an effective leader. And this began, in the 60s and 70s, and it's really now come to a head, especially with servant leadership being now the predominant leadership theory that is available out there. really the ethical and the moral aspect of things. Okay. So let's just peek real quickly into, here we go. So the assignments, obviously, chapters 8 through 11, covering those four leadership theories. And so what we're going to have you do is from those four leadership theories, we are going to have you choose one that best suits you and explain your reasons for using the examples from the textbook. Okay. So what we're going to be looking for here is this is again, same thing, APA format, 2 pages. Okay. Um, so I've increased that because you just need the real estate to be able to do these types of things. Writing the 1 page response here. What I want is you can give me the textbook stuff. And these are the things I'm really looking for is a lot of you are nailing the academic stuff. You're nailing what the model is, what it's supposed to do, how it's supposed to work and stuff. That's great. But leadership is a very personal thing. I want to see how you want to, how you can apply it in your current context, a past context, or a desired context and stuff. Um, so, how is it relevant to that? What is your personal insight? Do you think this theory has holes in it? If you do, what holes are there? And why do you think there are holes? This is what we're really, that's why you're here. It's not to regurgitate and do a 20-minute dissertation on a graphic dictation of a particular model, and you can wax eloquently on that. I'm not worried about that. Not a concern. It's like, with that theory, what can you use? How is it going to be relevant and stuff for you to be able to use? Okay. Do the 17th. Your discussion questions, you got 4 questions. So I'm not going to go into detail on those. You can read that. Okay. So what we're going to be looking at here now is let's get into what leadership is like. So you have been subject to right at this point about 7 different leadership theories. And one of the funny things is there is an Indian parable of the blind man and the elephant. And so you can see these blind men, they're trying to figure out, they've run into this colossal thing and they're trying to figure out what it really is. So you can see, hey, the one guy, he's at the tusk and he goes like, hey, this is a spear. Another goes, he's feeling the trunk, goes like, that's a stinking snake. Or the other one, it feels the foot, well, it's a tree. Then you can see the guy on top, he's feeling the ears flopping back and forth and goes like, no, this is a colossal fin. That's what this is. The guy on the ladder, he's feeling along the sides of the elephant. He thinks it's a wall. The other guy's got the tail, he thinks it's a rope. Problem is this, they're looking at it in isolation. They're looking at it in different, you know, I guess, context and perspectives. They're not actually walking around the whole elephant individually and figuring and seeing all these things for themselves and the different parts. Leadership theories are very much the same thing. Okay. So, you got this guy, it's about traits. No, it's about skills. Well, the guy on the top, really, it's more about leader behaviors. The guy that's doing the wall thing goes like, excuse me, but it's leaders establishing a path to a goal for followers. And another guy goes like, no, you need to develop relationships with your members and you get your center group of people that really want to work. So I'm going to favor them. Well, again, we have a problem because we're looking at leadership in isolation. So leadership is the only academic institution or academy that is out there that does not really have a consolidated theory of leadership. About 20 years ago, we had 30 plus of the best scholars on leadership theory come together, and they were going to solve that problem. They had at that point in time nearly 100, 125, maybe 150 years of literature and experience and all of these things that were going on. And so they go like, let's nail this down because, we're the only academy from an academic perspective that doesn't have a solid theory or model that we can use in every situation, no matter who it is. So they try to do this. So they're doing face-to-face things. They're actually teleworking and things for a period of about 3 years. And it takes them a couple of years to sort through all the things that they found. So there was three key people, and I excluded one of them, unfortunately, on the bottom saying, but Bass, Goethals, and Sorensen, they had created, they had wrote a book on really what their studies were, okay? And basically it says, in search of a theory of leadership. But here's what they had said, and this is about three-fourths of the way through the book. They said that they were successful identifying the key pieces of leadership. So traits, behaviors, skills, motivating people to a goal, exchanging leadership favors for the inside group that's really willing to work. I mean, those are realities. Okay. So, but they said this, even though they identified all the key pieces of leadership, they did not know how to put the pieces together. And in short, we needed a map. They had a map, but they needed to find a navigator. So all the pieces were the map. So anyway, this comes out of their text. And so what we're going to be reading on the four different theories of leadership tonight is a switch. Like I said, in those two key areas, centered now more on followership and values and ethics. So, transformational leadership, Bernard Bass is one of the key people that really has contributed this to this theory. We can see, all the different definitions, the components of transformational leadership. You can see Bass from 1985 to 2008 has contributed to a lot of these things. His principle is basically comes from Plato, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, House's charismatic leadership. All of these are aspects of these things here. I'm not going to go and read through all of this. You guys can do that later. But we're going to hit some of the key points. So as you can see, I have a lot of people that have contributed to this. Now, there's a couple of other folks that have contributed that I did not include in here. And again, and the next time I teach the class, I'm going to be adding these things onto that as well too. But you can see that Bass has been one of the key people. So he has contributed once, twice, three times, four, five, six, 7 times in this, more than any other. So he's almost responsible for a third of what is going on in this theory. So what we're looking at is this. You're going to be looking at a continuum of leadership. So transformational leadership to transactional leadership to laissez-faire leadership. So this is how he's looking at it. How do we transform people to the point where there's a leader follower transaction that takes place to the point where they are on autopilot and I can just go hands off, which means I've truly transformed them if I put enough time into them through a series of transactions to be able to have them on autopilot. So there are 4 I's, as he calls them, of transformational leadership: idealized influence, inspirational motivation, intellectual stimulation, individualized consideration. And again, what you're really looking at here from these things is you are trying to be a leader from a charismatic perspective to inspire people. So from idealized influence, we'd be looking at somebody like a Donald Trump, Nelson Mandela. Inspirational motivation. These are leaders who use symbols, shared vision to inspire followers, so on and so on. We could say in a modern context, that is Donald Trump, good, bad, or ugly. Okay. We're not going to get into the political discussion here. Intellectual stimulation, leaders that inspire others, the followers, to be creative, innovative. Elon Musk is one of those people. Okay. And those of you that live in Texas and are followers of the NBA, leaders that provide a supportive climate, they coach followers. So supportive climate doesn't necessarily mean all touchy-feely. Sometimes it means some hard discussions. And Greg Popovich, the coach of the Spurs, is an amazing example of this here. So here are a couple of the visual models here. So you can see the four eyes: idealized influence, inspirational motivation, intellectual stimulation, individualized consideration. Now, and here's the continuum: transformational leadership, transactional leadership, and the laissez-faire. So there's a couple of other things: contingent rewards. So transactional, you do X as a follower, and I will reward you accordingly. Constructive transactions, meaning, okay, the X that I'm asking you to do, it's actually going to help our organization achieve what it needs to. Management by exception. Okay, so that's not like equal management for everybody. It's what an individual may need. Some may need, like, look at, here's the roadmap, need you to do this, and go. They do it. Active, passive. Sometimes I need to be more, active in the transactions, but depending on the person, more passive. So again, these two here are pretty closely related. Corrective transactions. This is where you have those hard conversations. Okay. Laissez-faire, what we're trying to really do is at the point you've developed the follower, you've rewarded them, you've provided constructive transactions, and sort of had hands on, hands off as needed to be able to get them where they need to be. So at the point where they're on, like I said earlier, on autopilot. This is just another graph that's talking about, again, here are the four eyes. Here are the three, parts of the continuum: transformational leadership, transactional leadership. Okay. And then the laissez-faire, it is not in here, but it's performing beyond expectations and stuff. So when followers do that, you enter into the laissez-faire. Again, just a couple of different models. Just to note, this is actually out of the ninth edition of Norhouse's book. This is actually out of the seventh edition. So same thing, just a different look. I thought I'd give you two different looks. Sometimes you look at one chart, you're like, don't get it. You look at another one, like, got it. So just trying to give you the opportunity there. So transformational leadership, now all of those different factors that we talked about here, the seven different factors, what they've done is, from another point, they're looking at these things. So we're looking at the transformational leadership, or they call it in here non-leadership, transactional, the transformational. I'm sorry, this is more the laissez-faire. I went backwards here. Okay. Here are your four eyes. But then what these do is the management by exception passive, management by exception active. That's what they're doing. So it's a sort of a continuum, working from the transactional or the transformational to the transactional to the laissez-faire. And all they've done here is they've just given them acronyms and stuff. Again, here is just a little different picture on these things that maybe help you understand it a little better. So how do you make it work? Well, first and foremost, here are several things that transformational leaders need to be able to do. Number one, the goal is to empower followers and nurture them along the path to the point where they are on autopilot. But to be able to do that, they really need to be inspired. And this is where the charismatic aspect, I think, from a leader is, you're a strong role model, and you really employ, from a visual, very visible context, highly developed moral values. You listen to followers, you tolerate opposing views because there are going to be different ways that people may be gifted and approach A with that person may not work, but approach B may work to be able to get you where you need. More importantly, though, what you really need to do is like the path goal theory. Hey, this is what we need to do, but this is in a bigger, it's not from a particular task that here is the goal and here are the steps to be able to get you there, but it's vision for the organization as a whole. This is the first time we're really looking at what is the purpose of my organization? And from a collective perspective, how we get everybody on the same, direction, same boat to be able to achieve the organization's outcomes and its sole purpose, mission, vision, and stuff. So in that way, really, you're sort of selling it. You're selling the ethical values. You're selling that, hey, I want to empower you. So really, what happens in doing these preceding things, what Bath says, you become a social architect. You're involved in developing not just the outcomes, but the culture of the organization to achieve the outcomes. But you're out in the front modeling this. You're pointing, this is where we need you to go. This is true north. And fundamentally, you work with people to build trust and foster the collaborative environment, which is the culture of the organization. Strength, widely researched from a lot of different perspectives. And for a period of about, you can see here, about 22 years, third of all the articles that were written in leadership research were on the transformational leadership theory. And that's because of the follower aspect, the ethical aspect, the enabling aspect of things, casting vision. These are very, very different types of conversations that have been had a little bit in previous theories, but they're front and center in the transformational leadership theory for the very first time. As such, because it has a follower centric type of thing, it's intuitive. People are looking at this as how do we develop people within the organization to be, movers and shakers. It treats leadership also as a process, not a prescriptive type of thing or a definitive type of thing of this is what a leader is. It's actually a leader is, but this is the process that they do to develop, followers from a leadership perspective. It does incorporate some of the other forms of leadership from other leadership models, but again, it has that some of these ideas that are in here aren't new. They've just been on the fringes. Now these are center stage. Okay. But again, like we said in the introduction, it puts a large emphasis on the follower and their needs and how to develop that follower to, equip them. So this is the first leadership theory that really put a follower front and center. Okay. And they say research does suggest it's an effective form of leadership. However, some of the criticisms are there's a lot of moving pieces to it. I mean, you guys saw the alphabet soup for the acronyms and moving through, the four I's into the continuum and then the sub factors and like, dang, what the heck is all that about? Well, it is. It's complex. Um, but in its complexity, but also its familiarity of some of the key, elements and stuff of other leadership theories, there's a lot of overlapping. So it's from a research perspective, are you really able to sort of separate it out from one leadership theory or is it this leadership theory? Okay. Um, Also, they accuse Bass and others that transformational leadership is really a personality trait rather than a behavior. So, charismatic personalities, people that embrace relationship, these are personality traits rather than a behavior. Okay. Some people are just wired that way. So, can it be a learned behavior or is it natural? And this is where we go all the way back to the great man theory of leadership. Are you born with it or can you develop it? Can you develop the skills? Can you develop, the things that need to be, effective in transforming followers? This is why sometimes, and critics actually call it the heroic leadership, or like I just said a moment ago, heroic leadership is the great man theory. So those are the criticisms. Application, well, here's the deal. Because of its complexity, there are hardly any companies that are using it in their HR departments to train their people. There are good things in there about what leaders should emphasize. Okay. And the good news is it can be used at all organization. And I think the single greatest thing about it is it's a reminder of what the central purpose of the leader is, to help followers define goals and help them to reach the goal. So that's more getting into the path of goal thing, but it's now more than path goal in how you develop them to get there. So that's transformational leadership. Authentic leadership. Bill George, he was the former chairman and CEO of an organization called Medtronic. And so, based upon his leadership things, he learned that really to lead well, you got to be somebody worth following. And the saying here probably, I guess, sums it up, and you're not going to see this in your Norhouse book, but he basically says, before you change the world, you have to change yourself. And one of the things where I first saw this and run across this was in my active duty military career. Even though I was Air Force, I had the opportunity to go to the Chief Petty Officer Academy for the U.S. Coast Guard. And that was their thing. We need to fix you before you can fix anybody else. And so the whole thing was very leader focused. So again, here are just some of the definitions, the differences between other leadership theories. Here's the reason for it. But basically what they say is transformational leadership was great, but there's some things that it missed. And that's what we're seeing with every leadership theory. A new one comes out. Why? Because there's a problem, a challenge, or something that wasn't addressed in its predecessor. Okay. Key contributors, we see George in 2003. We see a few other folks, but it was really George that sort of put this on the map. Terry did something in 93, George 10 years later. Luthans and Avalio, they did some things, but you see Avalio in 2003, 2005, 8, also in 2009. So you can see for a period of 6 years, this individual really contributed to it. So we'll show you a couple of the different models that are out there. So Harry in 93, he sort of started things off when he used something called the authentic action wheel. And there's 5 aspects of authentic action. Authentic means true. It means genuine. It means that there is no subterfuge. There is no hiding of things. I am totally visible. I'm an open book to everybody to be able to read. And what you read is who I am. So the action wheel is really why I'm leading. I need to actually communicate meaning. So this is the values, the ethics. I need to illustrate mission. Those two things, very similar with transformational leadership. But existence, what is my purpose? It's that, uh, big question of life. What is the meaning of life? Why am I here? Well, authentic leadership actually sort of asks that question, not in a big way, but in a way of like, okay, how is it what I'm doing? What is really the purpose of all of this? Power. Okay, who has the power? How do I use the power? How do I communicate that power and stuff? How do I use it to, motivate, how to provide morale, control, those things. One of the other important things that's really, really critical is how do I resource people? How do I provide the training? How do I provide the equipment? What's the capital? What information do I give them? What is it that they need? And then structure. What are the policies? What are the procedures? What are the processes? What are the models that I'm going to use? So an authentic leader is going to be very clear and transparent in every one of these types of things. But this is according to Terry. So George, a decade later, um, he tries to sort of simplify this a little bit with four characteristics of authentic leadership. So, purpose, values, and those are in Terry's. These are also in transformational leadership. But now this is talked about in transformational leadership and Terry, but it's more now. I really am focusing on relationships. That is a major thing. Self-discipline. People need to see me as a leader that, no kidding, is disciplined, that is consistently striving forward. Nothing is going to dissuade me from the purpose of the organization and just heart, you know. There are racehorses there. Secretary, it was one of those racehorses that they just wouldn't lose because of just the heart that they had in it. They're leaders that just they're just going to keep trudging on no matter what adversity is thrown at them. They're going to press on. These are the hub of an authentic leader. So the heart also is the compassion. The heart is you're seeing people for who they are. Passion and purpose. They are linked. Values, how am I living out those values visibly in my behaviors? Relationship, how do I connect with others? And self-discipline, if I exemplify that, I am going to exemplify consistency in my organization as well too. So now you have another individual that had come out with this, Walumba, in probably 5 years later after George, and looking at some of the different things. So they're looking at authentic leadership is being self-aware, has the moral perspective. Now, this is the processes, but from a balanced perspective, but then also the relationship thing, but it's transparent. So these are the things that feed into authentic leadership. However, how do I get these things here? So basically, you have the psychological capacity to be able to do this. So you're emotionally healthy. You have good moral fiber, and critical life events have actually shaped you. So what Walumba is saying, these three are critical to these four to be able to equal authentic leadership. So factors that influence authentic leadership, this is what Vallo and Luthans have said: confidence, hope, optimism, and resilience. So just put that in for what it's worth department, but it does hit to the core of what it is that we have talked about so far as this theory. So authentic leadership here. That's a slide from the last one. Scratch. Okay. My apologies. I thought I got rid of that. So how does authentic leadership work? Well, the big thing is it develops qualities that a leader wants to see in others. But it's also, the trustworthiness, the believableness, that's got to be developed in the leader themselves. It also has a practical and a theoretical aspect of things. So, practical leaders have to be purposeful, value centered, relational, self disciplined, and compassionate. They have to demonstrate this. And what they do in this is the leaders, they treat followers fairly, but don't give any single person special attention, which with the path goal theory, that sort of is in conflict with that. Theoretical, it does try to account for what they believe authentic leadership is. And what we're looking at from an authentic leadership perspective, that leaders demonstrate self-awareness, internal moral fiber and perspective, and they're balanced and they are relational and they're transparent. with those relationships. So the thing that is interesting about it is you probably saw not nearly as many authors on authentic leadership as transformational leadership. So it's a leadership theory that's still in development. Um, what it does bring to the table is people have the capacity to learn leadership, more specifically to be authentic leaders. But the goal of the authentic leader is really doing the right thing. And so that's one of the weaknesses, defining what is the right thing. But it's being honest with followers and with themselves. And as I mentioned just the slide before, it's critical life events that actually help shape the greater authenticity to followers. Strengths, okay, man, front and center, the importance of trustworthy leadership. Okay, also provides a clear picture of who the leader is, how they will act, and guidelines of how individuals can be authentic leaders. And it does suggest, again, leaders that are authentic can be built over time. Criticism. Well, like so many of these other models that are out there, they just research has not been able to nail it down because there's just too many things that are part of something else and things haven't been clearly defined. Moral component exactly is one of those things. It isn't fully explained or developed. So that's a problem. Um, and also, does it really contribute to organization outcomes? And the jury is out on that. Servant leadership. So Robert Greenleaf, if I remember right, he was with IBM in the 50s and the 60s, and I think maybe even in the 40s. And so he did a lot of analysis on things that worked, things that didn't work. And he came up with this theory called servant leadership. This is the most prevalently discussed, talked about, and advocated form of leadership today. So we're going to get into this, but I like his saying here, good leaders must first become good servants. Okay. Um, again, definitions, definite, differences, so on and so on. And one of the antecedents, this is going to be really important here. There are three people, Jesus Christ and how he was a servant to his 12 disciples. That is a part of this. And Hess, in a book that he had written, Journey to the East, was basically the whole, I guess, context of the story is somebody comes across a band of travelers that Hess is the leader, but this individual can't figure out who's the leader because Hess is always sitting in the background, and he's been developing followers to be, from a servant perspective, to become enabled to do the work that needs to be done. Camus, in 57, he created a lecture basically sort of stating that, we really need to be servants and it's unethical from the power perspective of leaders always dictating and wielding power. So that was some of the challenge. You can see this has got a lot of literature. There's even newer literature that's been done on this. But Greenleaf has been the one that really laid the foundation here. You'll see Spears. Spears did some work in 2002, 6 years later in 2008. But what Spears did is he became in charge of the Greenleaf Institute, and he's the one that published a lot of what Greenleaf had said. So when you see Greenleaf and Spears together, it's really just Greenleaf. Okay. He didn't really author anything new. So Greenleaf's 10 characteristics of servant leadership. Norhaus goes into a lot of detail in all of these things, but we're seeing a lot of the same things that we saw in the transformational and transformational leadership, authentic leadership. So listening to followers, empathy for followers, awareness of where they're from, persuading followers on a path or a vision, um, foresight, stewardship, commitment to the growth of people, building a community that can actually accomplish the goals of the organization. Lenin, he has some things that were added several years later. So they have what they call antecedent conditions. So things that had to be in place before you could actually exercise servant leader behaviors. You can see a lot of these are some of the same 10 characteristics that Greenleaf had talked about, but you're only seeing one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, and not all of them the same. Some of them have been put together. But the thing is, here are the things that have to be done first. Context, as far as the culture, the leader themselves, what are the attributes, and the follower's ability to be able to be receptive to this type of leadership, because we're constantly putting responsibility on the follower. So the outcome is the followers' performance and their growth. The organization should grow and perform better. And one of the key attributes of certain leadership is to influence culture and society for the better. It's a very altruistic leadership model. Here are different people that have contributed and some of their key factors. So Lamb in 99, Wong and Davy, 2007, and so on and so on. It's not a very good quality picture in the e-text that I had, but it is on page 465 if you're looking. So how does it work? Well, leaders commit themselves to putting followers first. And it demands that the leader really be honest and look to treat followers fairly. As we mentioned earlier, it's a very altruistic in that it is deep seated in helping others, but also the bottom line is the ultimate goal through empowering and developing leaders through being a servant to them is to cause positive change in community and the society at large. It also addresses one of the key elements of leadership is power. Power is not used to dominate, but power is shared to be able to enable others to become more autonomous. So again, we are now putting a lot more weight on the responsibility of the follower. And again, this is the third theory in a row where followers have been front and center. Strengths, well, it's the only leadership theory that has a focus on caring for others. Um, and there is some analysis that basically says there is a direct correlation with the level of servant leadership to the behavior and the outcomes of employee performance. Now, it is a counterintuitive approach to all other forms of leadership and how power and influence are used. We're trying to give as much power to the follower. Criticism. The name servant implies the leader is a follower, and that's the problem. Because in the name itself, it's like, well, if I'm going to lead, I just need to sit back and sit by the campfire and just sort of watch. And it becomes a laissez-faire thing, and you're not developing anybody. But the true heart of the theory is in the background, I'm always working, I'm always guiding, I'm always coming alongside, I'm being very aware in a passive but proactive way. The other thing that's a criticism is the theory is not clear on how servant leadership really does contribute to organizational change. Does it really change? Followers may feel better about themselves and they may feel more enabled and they love, maybe the power sharing thing. But here's the thing, it is really difficult. Overtone, the good leaders, put their followers first may actually be too utopian and unrealistic. And again, that's what happens with cut and paste. Sorry. So we're not in leader member exchange there. So it can be used at all levels of management and all types of organizations. And it's one of the few leadership theories that actually corporate HR folks use to train their people. Um, and it's also taught extensively in many American universities. And as I said at the beginning, it's the most recognized leadership theory that is out there today. Adaptive leadership. Ronald Heifetz, he's like, okay, so what is part of the leadership environment that we struggle with most? And that's change. And organizations are always changing. It's because the technology is changing, the political landscape is changing, and we need to be able to look at, okay, we have to prepare our followers to adapt to the change. So how do we do that? Because if we don't, we cannot have effective outcomes in the organization. So this is what he looks at here. Again, we've had other people before him, but he started doing some work in 88, again in 94, 97, 2002, 2009. So he has been center stage in developing this. Uh, okay. Now, what he's looking at here is this. What are the situational challenges? What are the leaders' behaviors that are needed? And how do we adapt in our work? So they can, like I said, technical challenges, uh, politics, the culture, all of those types of things. So here are five leader behaviors that he basically says that we need to be able to do. Get in the balcony, take a look. What is changing? What's going on? How is this changing the industry? How is this changing culture? How is this changing and challenging my organization? Then, once you do that, you identify how do I adapt to this challenge, and you provide a way forward. The important thing is to regulate distress. You got to tell your folks, hey, look it, we have got to change, and people don't like change. So how do we go? How are we going to navigate this? Can you have to understand emotions are involved? Leader member exchange talked about leadership as an emotional endeavor. And so when there's change, emotions are involved. So you have to really look at this. Number four, maintain disciplined intention. Dog and a bone. Keep going. Do not let things dissuade you. And then give the work back to the people. This is again a thing from servant leadership is always trying to give the work to people to be able to accomplish things that are done. Again, a follower centric leadership theory and protect leadership voices from below. So you got a lot of people saying a lot of things, and they're going to be critical, or they're going to be naysayers, or we can't do it. And it's like you just keep pressing on. So these are the things that a leader needs to be able to do. So what we're looking at here is this exchange, how we adapt between the leader and the follower, the exchange and the interaction that's going on. That is what is going on. The leader behaviors are key to being able to do this, to be able to have that interaction, to get them to adapt, to be able to get on track, to be able to have them continue and overcome, to accomplish um, the basic thing, the challenge that has been laid in front. Okay, so how does it work? Big focus, engage individuals in the process of the challenge to adapt. Okay, and focus on what those adaptations are going to be required of people. What are the challenges? How do they need to change? And these are, again, this is a screwball theory in many ways, but the things that you see here are, applicable in any type of leadership situation because they're just going to be changes. So uh, those aspects that Heifetz had put together, this is more of a path forward. and how to be able to go ahead and do this. Okay, so those are the prescriptive steps. So the strengths, it's a process approach to leadership, develops a process, looks at the challenge, identifies a process, implements the process, and ensures people are following that process. Um, Helps followers deal with conflict, conflicting values, even within themselves. And it's designed to challenge follower values. Things like this is too much, or we can't do this, or this is out of our job jar. I used to have bosses tell me all those types of things, or it's always been this way, or nobody can change it. Adaptive leadership is going like, no, we're going to press through. No excuses. Again, the prescriptive approach, these are the first three of five aspects that we talked about a little bit earlier. Yeah, okay. The six steps here. Okay. So get on the balcony, identify adaptive change. So these are critical things that are known as prescriptive aspect of this theory. It's not a top-down leadership approach, but it does focus on the leadership environment between the leader and the follower. Criticism, like I said, a lot of these more squirrely leadership theories have very little empirical research done on them. They really can't verify the claims of adaptive leadership, probably because it's based on a lot of ideas and, they're good ideas and some assumption. Um, but the thing is, since it's trying to be more of a practical approach to leadership, it's unclear how people are going to adapt. A lot of people say it's just, too abstract. Great, some great things, some takeaways, like I mentioned earlier and stuff. But really what it is it is going to continue to challenge follower values. So if you got people that work for you, that are comfortable with the status quo, that they are not hard chargers, they are not people that just adapt and overcome not in their DNA. This is going to be really uncomfortable for some people like that. The other thing it doesn't really talk about, that the three other theories we talked about, is the moral dimension. Doesn't It talks about you need to be a moral leader, but it doesn't really talk about the how. Okay, so here's more of a flow chart and stuff from an application perspective. So those are your four leadership theories. Okay, so the assignment is going to be able to ensure that you pick one of the theories, explain that theory, and then how you would use it in your context. So that could be your current job, past job, or a job that you'd want to be a part of and stuff in the future. Okay. Here are just some of the basics here that I've been grading you guys on and stuff. You have any questions on those, please just let me know. And that's what the 8 o'clock forum basically is to be able to do that, to be able to answer any of your questions or why am I looking at something this way, or I'm having a disconnect between this theory and that theory, and you need help. So, I mean, that's what it's intended to be for. Okay, you're familiar with the grading rubric. Again, if you have any uh, challenges with that, let me know. So, have any questions on assignments, the reading material, the grading, or anything else, fire me off an email, send me a text, pop in at 8 o'clock on Monday evenings. We'll get all your questions answered for you. So, with that being said, we will go ahead and we'll call it an evening and things. But great to be able to just visit with you. And I'm just hoping that these videos are helpful. So, not congratulations, but just hope things are going well for you guys this week in your writing assignment. So we'll talk to you next week. Thanks so much.